One of the things that I think is that assessment has grown up, particularly in the executive search concept of being able to identify people for jobs, and mostly outside people for jobs. And it really doesn't have development attached to it. It's really kind of a separate piece that's assessment.
A selection process.
A selection process, right. And I think that this assessment without any development is really missing the boat. I mean, I think that you really don't get the power of this assessment unless you actually have real development. You know that you're much more successful if you groom the people from the inside than you bring them from the outside. I mean, there's lots of data that talks about that. What I think we've really been focused on is understanding what is the criteria for success in a particular organization, assessing against that, and then really creating individualized development coaching. If you're really talking about accelerating development, this deep kind of assessment that you've been doing, George, is the kind of thing that a coach like me can use to really enable somebody to understand where the development edges are.
One key piece of in-depth assessment is a rather lengthy in-person interview that can go 3 hours or more, where we review the person's career trajectory, key challenges, and how they handled those challenges over the course of the last 3 to 5 years. And what that helps you do is really learn from the inside out what the person's experiences are, what their decision-making processes have been all about, who they've interacted with, how they've interacted with them, and a lot of information which, when you feed that back to the executive in the context of an assessment, has a lot of reality associated with it.
I think if you add on to that a qualitative 360 of their stakeholders, the people who actually currently are experiencing them in their leadership, and you couple that with this in-depth interview, you get a pretty rich picture of what's going on.
And I think the combination is really essential. You can't just do one without the other.
And every once in a while you can put in some kind of quantitative personality-based assessment or other kinds of assessments depending on the organization and depending on what the role is. We believe really strongly that you need to give the individual the same data that you give the board. The only thing that we don't give is whether or not they're in line for the C-suite.
I think another thing that's really important is being absolutely transparent about how the information is going to be used and who gets to see it at the very beginning. And we emphasize that it's primarily used for development.
I think that at this level, where we do these kinds of assessments, you very rarely get feedback. I think that it's pretty unusual to get any kind of feedback, but to get this kind of in-depth feedback is, well, some of my clients say it's really a gift, because we've got really competent people, and if you understand where your strengths are and where your development areas are, you can do something about it. I think the idea about being able to identify what are you assessing against is an exercise for the board, for the senior leadership, for the CEO, around what is it really going to take in the next 3 to 5 years to be able to do the job. And I think that people probably have some idea about that, but to really articulate and put it out there gives everybody the opportunity to think about their own self against that criteria.